Hi everyone, it's Sam Mackay from Enterprise DNA here. I've got a really cool scenario here for you that came through the Enterprise DNA support forum that I think deserves a deeper look, and I really enjoyed working through the solution, actually working it out. And I think it will be a good one to really dive into in a video tutorial, just so you can see how you can generate these amazing insights, just utilizing some slightly more technical relationship concepts in your data model, but also utilizing some DAX formula to get the right calculation in the right context. So the scenario is that a member wrote in and said, I need to work out how many days within any month a person occupied something. So they might have occupied like a hospital bed, or they might have occupied something that they've taken out from a shared library or something like that. Another good example is of where this might be is how many days within a month someone took out a book from a library. Something like that. So it's basically just working between two dates, and you'll see in a second when I jump to the example in Power BI in a PBIX file that we have, say, two dates, and we have to manage that. Okay, so let's just jump across here. Let's have a look at the solution. So you see here, we've got who the patient was. In this case, we're talking, say, hospital stays, right? Who the patient was, when they were admitted, and when they departed. And then we have all of our months here, and we're trying to work out in any month, how many days did they actually occupy that bed? And so you can see here as we come down, we can see all the people who occupied it in June, and then in July and August, and then who, say, stayed the longest period, right? It's actually quite interesting. It's quite an interesting insight, say, if you wanted to really dive into how you manage your occupancy levels, for example. And the same could be for short-term rentals or Airbnb rentals, something like that. This is where this is a very interesting insight. Okay, so let's have a quick look. This is just demo data, and so we've got an admit date and a departure date. So we're working with two dates here, and this is a tricky scenario that a lot of people get confused about. So it's good that I'm going over it. I'm glad to be going over it again in a very real world scenario here. Okay, so we need to work out, for this person, this patient one, right? How many days did they stay in 1 month and another month? So in theory, we've got 24th of the 7th, so they probably stayed 7 days there and 11 days in August. So we need to show that visually. Let's have a quick look at the model. Okay, you'll see what I've done here. Now I have created these inactive relationships, and this is the key, right? When you are working with any situation, we have multiple dates in your fact table. Okay, you always want to have your date table here that doesn't change at all, but you want these inactive relationships so that you can work some logic through this table, but also bring in some context from the dates table. Okay, you're gonna actually see that in theory, for this one answer, we don't even need these relationships, but these are always best practice to have, because invariably you'll want to do some other calculation in your of your fact table, and you want to create context from the date table, and this is where that use relationship function comes in handy, where you can turn on these relationships. Okay, so it's always best practice to use these inactive relationships if you are working with multiple dates in your fact table. Okay, don't forget that. Okay, so setup is all done in the data model, right? And our date table here is just a pretty standard date table that I use all the time, and has all of the things that you need when you're running sort of some data analysis, right? And so in this case, we're going to use this month and calendar column. We could rename it better, honestly, but it doesn't matter in this case. Okay, so let's have a look at the formula, and we'll work through it slowly. Like I actually played around with a few formulas that I sort of would branch from one to the other, and then I ultimately landed on this one here. Okay, so there's a little bit to it, but there's only a little bit to it because we have to work through a little bit of logic at every single month to work out. We need a few if statements to work through logic to see, did it actually land in this month versus not. I want to bring you to this part here first, okay? Now remember with DAX, every result is calculated individually. Okay, so this result I'm hovered over here, this calculates differently to this result here. And that's all due to the context in which this result is calculating in. Okay, so the context is the same from patient 238, right? From this one to this one, but the context is different because we've got August here and we've got September here. Okay, and so the calculations will be different based on that particular context. Now, the interesting thing about context here is that there's nothing coming naturally via an active relationship, right? We have to generate some values from what we have in our matrix with DAX formula because nothing's happening naturally, okay? So what we do is I've used variables to create the sort of bounds that we're going to use in our if statements, or the parameters that we're going to use in our if statements, okay? So for any single result here, I need to work out what the admit date is. I need to work out what the departure date is, okay? So I've calculated here, this is the admit date, this is the departure date. At the same time, I need to work out what the min date is in this context and the max date. So basically, I need to work out what is the first day and what is the 30th or 31st day for that particular month in this context, right? So that max and min are going and working out, so 1st or 30th, 1st or 31st, 1st or 29th, whatever. Okay, and this is where the logic comes in, right? Okay, this is where we need to work out a bit of logic that says, is the admit date and departure date sort of, are they sitting within any particular month? And then how many days within that month are they sitting? So we have, there's a little bit of logic here, but we have, first, if I said, if the admit date, so let's just look at this example, if the admit date is less than the min date in context, so if this one is less than min date, right? And so the 7th of the 8th, the 17th of the 8th is less than the, let's have a look, is not less than that. So that's going to evaluate obviously to false, and then it's going to hit one of our other ones here. So it's probably going to hit this one. If the admit date is greater than the min date in context, and the admit date is less than the max date, which it certainly is. So it's greater than the min date in context, and it's less than the max, right? And the departure date is greater than the min date, then we need to get the min of the departure date and max date in context. So the departure date is going to be less than the max date in context, which is the 30th of August, right? And then we work out the difference between those, or it could be maybe it's the 31st of August. Is that right? Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but it's close enough, right? Hopefully you can get the logic here. This is what I always try and show you guys is the logic, and then you can work it in yourself. And then we're obviously going that minus the admit date, sorry. So that's going to give us the 14 here and the 18 here. Okay, so I don't want to go over too much more there because, look, it's a little bit complex, and just working through every single minor detail there for the result is a little bit laborious, right? So this will obviously be made, you can download it, but you can also, because it's a video, you can also just really work through it slowly yourself and try and implement it yourself. But I really like the scenario, right? That's why I wanted to create a tutorial, because the scenario around it was quite unique. I hadn't really done much about it before. And it just took working through a little bit of logic, especially within this return area of the DAX formula, with a few if statements to actually get it ultimately correct and quite seamlessly integrated into this matrix. And what you can also do is you can also, if you wanted to dive into a specific month and who was there, who was occupying this location during a specific month, you can also still click into here and change the size of the matrix, right? So, and you could have different filters here. You could have quarters, you could have years, you could have a whole variety of different filtering going on in these particular results. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed this one. This was a really great question from the support forum that spent a bit of time working through getting a solution to the member. But ultimately, I think the solution was great. It was a really, really cool thing to work through, and hopefully you're able to see the benefits of as well if you're doing something similar. Okay, so hopefully if you got something out of this and you really enjoyed it, throw the video a like. Really appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe to Enterprise DNA TV. Got lots of great content coming out very soon. So looking forward to getting that out to you as soon as I can. Okay, take care. All the best.